Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to call the meeting to order. This is the meeting of Tuesday, November 14th, Finance and Administration Committee meeting. Madam Clerk, can we do a roll call, please? Electronic, please. Great. Chair Henry is joining us electronically, and there's a number of guests that are joining us electronically as well. Councillor Kerr, Mayor Schumer, and Mayor Colley are joining us electronically. Any declarations of interest? Being done, adoption of the minutes of October 10th, moved by Councillor Lee, second by Councillor Leahy. Corrections? Being none, I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? That item is carried. There's no statutory meetings. There's no presentation. There's no delegations in public. There are a couple of administrative items. First one is is there correspondence? Oh, yeah, I'm going to go on this. The appointment of the Accessibility Advisory Committee, the appointment is moved by Councillor McDougall. Second, Councillor Wu. Debate. Being none, I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? That item is carried. Next item is a memo from the Commissioner in regards to guideline report referral. Commissioner?
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick note that we are looking at, I think the biggest note is that we're looking at March as the budget date in order to try to, we're struggling trying to find something to bring back to you that would be palatable. And Elaine and I have had lots of, and Nicole and I really have been trying to put together something. So we'll have something for you for November, but then our December, but then our time cascades. So it's more to have a heads up that March is when you need to hold your calendars, and likely our open house will be early January. So we'll confirm all of that in short order, but that's really the heads up for your personal calendars to keep in mind. Thank you.
Questions? Okay, there's a report then. Oh, sorry, my bad. Councillor Leahy.
Thank you, Chair Ash. Just a really quick thing. So is it possible for us to get to the lower guideline that we're looking for? Is it, I know it references in the report looking for federal provincial supports. That's why we're causing the delay. Is it realistic that we're going to get some of those things that we're applying for?
So through the chair, the timing may not align to get much more information that we have now. Mm-hmm. But we're also looking back at what we put together ourselves and trying to, being very respectful of committee's position as well as the challenges in the economy these days. We are really trying to come back with something palatable that we can manage, even if we don't see those announcements come until later. So we're we're working at it from all angles to bring back something.
Okay. No, I look forward to the debate because it's just the challenge will be the price tag, and there'll be some opportunities. If it's not palatable with council, can we relook at the priorities of all the different things we're looking at? Because it's such a high increase proposed, not just now, but for multiple years.
So maybe a request I can make that you can chew over between now and then. While the guideline focus is very important, our challenge is the more we get into budget debates around the guideline, the less resources we have to actually do the budget. So I get into this catch-22 that it's a huge amount of work to try to come back with other items when budget then is staring at us. So my hope is that we can give you enough information that you're comfortable enough with a number and set those high-level priorities of what you think is the most important. And then we will come back in March to meet that number and try to have your highest level priorities included.
Okay.
But I say my challenge is if we have too many budget debates
I
before I
get it.
get to budget, it's more of a resourcing, literally
Yeah.
24/7, trying to rework through all the departments, all of the scenarios. So my personal hope is that we can find a number you're comfortable with, and then we'll go back and try to deliver on as much as we possibly can with that.
Okay, no, that's fair. That's very helpful. Thank you. That's my question, Chair.
The appropriate motion is motion to receive for information, moved by Councillor Garrard, second by Councillor Leahy. Debate? I don't think so. He's probably doesn't know he has a request in, so I'm going to assume he's not, because otherwise he, I don't know how I'm going to assume that. So, but I think he's driving. So I'm going to call the question. All's in favor? Opposed? That item is carried. Moving on to the reports. First item is the report in regards to extension of the agreement with Community Development Council Durham for settlement services for asylum seekers and refugees. Commissioner, do you want to speak to this?
So through the chair, actually, the CAO might wish to speak to it, and then Jonathan is here representing Stella as well to answer questions.
CEO?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. As you know, we continue to have an inflow of refugees in the region. This report will give us resources to carry us through until March. I will be meeting with the federal deputy minister. I believe it's November 20th, and one of the issues on our agenda is certainly the status of our application for interim housing benefits, which would offset some of these costs. It's critical, however, that we move forward with this report, given that we're entering the winter season, and it does pay for not only the spaces where many of the refugees are accommodated, but also the staff at CDCD to support those refugees or asylum seekers. It's a combination of the two, and I'm not sure if Jonathan has anything to add.
No, thank you, Elaine. Yeah, it is incredibly important to continue with this relationship with CDCD. They were the initial organization that came forward during the Ukraine response as well, and have the skill set with settlement services for the client base that we're working with.
Okay, there is a report and a recommendation that requests or suggests recommends to council $6 million in additional funding till March 31st. Have a mover? Councillor Wu. Seconder? Councillor Lee. Questions or debate? Councillor Leahy.
This particular, oh, is it not on? Oh, sorry. I look right at it, don't see it. Thank you. So I guess my question is around the 6.7 million grant that we're looking for to offset the $6 million. Is that for the entire year? Is that for just this piece? And will we get the opportunity to apply for that again? Because after March 31st, we're still going to incur some costs, I would imagine.
So I stand to be corrected, but this 6 million is incremental above what we've already spent, and it's only going to get us to March 31st so that it gets us to the budget. So then if the problem hasn't been resolved by the federal government at that point through the budget process, you'll have to consider what steps you wish to take. So this just gets us to essentially to the regional budget and hopefully some much better announcements between now and then. But I'm not sure if Jonathan has anything to add, but this is interim funding over and above what's already been applied for.
No, for sure.
Yeah, and just to add, so the 6.7 million, that's what we've applied for with the IHAP program. We're in ongoing communication with the federal government through the asylum branch on our application, but they are making decisions by the end of the year around the allocations that are going out. So Toronto received an allocation earlier than other municipalities, but we're in the same boat as other municipalities such as York, Halton, Niagara, that haven't received an additional allocation for this.
And is that additional allocation for costs incurred to date, or it's for next year's costs? Or I'm just curious of how much more we'll be able to apply after December.
So it's expenditure based, so it would be for costs incurred.
Oh, it's always a reimbursement. So there will likely be an opportunity in the future to apply again.
Absolutely, we've already flagged it.
Okay, perfect. That's really all I wanted to know. Thank you very much.
Councillor Schumer.
Mr. Chair. Just a confirmation, I guess, to the Commissioner of Finance. So this will, because it's straddling the years, will this be part of 2023 or 2024, or will it be somehow allocated, or?
So through the chair, this will essentially be funded, it says at the discretion of the commissioner, so whatever grant funding we don't have would be funded from the Operating Impact Reserve Fund for what's spent up to December 31st, and what's needed from January to March will be set aside, accrued essentially for January to March from that reserve fund, because council won't have approved a tax levy budget by that point.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, if there's no further debate, I'm going to call the question. Duly moved and seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? That item is carried. Next item is the debt strategy report. Commissioner, do you want to speak to this?
Through the chair, this primarily is almost an information report more than anything else, but I really wanted this committee to understand what they were going to see and what was happening with respect to the greater debt loads. And as well, from your local perspective, there's a lot more work involved in dealing with debt now that we're dealing with much larger amounts of debt. So this is to keep moving us forward to meet all of the requirements that we've included in last year's budget, but also going forward with the sheer dollar values that we're now projecting from a debt perspective.
Okay, there's a recommendation. So I'm going to get on the floor and then do questions. Moved by Councillor Leahy, second by Councillor McDougall. Mayor Collier.
Oh, thank you, Chair. Just a quick question through you to the treasurer. I understand there has been in the past some restrictions as far as term lengths for different debentures, specifically dealing with real estate. Can you just talk quickly to what those are and how you may be looking to modify those for potentially longer terms?
So through the chair, the traditional bonds that we would have issued, the serial bonds, they only attracted a certain market. So you had to structure them in certain ways to be attractive to sell. Moving to the sinking fund bonds, they typically go out much longer because they're structured that the person that buys those bonds could sell them on the market. So they're not tied in to have to keep it right till 30 years. So that means that they're more marketable, and that means that then we can have longer time frames because they can buy and sell them and aren't stuck with them. So it does give us opportunity. The reduced opportunity on the other side is that they generally want round number years. So they don't want 4 years and 7 years. They want those incremental 5, 10, 20 kind of setup. So we'll likely have to issue both types, but this will really open up that ability for those longer term to match those facilities. And then we're going to come back with a debt management policy to this committee because we still need to be careful over how long we go out from a debt perspective because we are committing future taxpayers to that funding. So we do need to still have a debt management policy from this committee on what their thoughts are on how long would we debenture a facility versus rolling stock versus, those, roads, that kind of thing, if we get into structures. So that debt management policy will come back to this committee to lay out their groundwork on how they want us to proceed on sort of outlines of guidelines for that.
Okay, and that's sort of what I was asking. I understand there was, for real estate acquisitions, for instance, not real estate, capital improvements, limitations of 10, 15 years, which makes the carrying charges higher for municipalities versus now with the sinking debentures, it could allow us up to 20 or so and to spread out those costs and reduce the annual carrying fees. So I imagine that will all be part of your debt strategy when it comes back.
That's correct. And as I say, particularly for those large facilities, that drives the sinking fund rather than a serial, and it opens up those opportunities.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you very much, Chair.
Councillor Leahy.
Thank you, Mayor Ash. So on this particular thing, so fully supportive of looking at the sinking debentures, understanding from the report it's going to give us more flexibility and more opportunities. One of my first questions is around the annual repayment limit. Since we're issuing debt on behalf of the lower tier municipalities, does that impact our annual repayment limit? Let's say we borrow $1 from Whitby and our limit is $10, does that mean our limit is now only $9? Or is it because it's coming from another level of government, it's the combined repayment limit of what Whitby's and Oshawa, I mean, Durham's is? Are there any restrictions because we're the issuer of the debt is my first question.
So through the chair, I only have, I'll say half an answer.
That's fine.
So each treasurer has to attest that the amount that they're borrowing is within that annual repayment limit.
Okay,
However, because under the Municipal Act, the region has to issue the debt, they're required to, then that triggers in on a joint and several liability for the debt. So because we've never pushed that limit of what's allowed, we haven't aggressively pursued a definition of what happens, for example, and this is this is an extreme example to make a point. If we're approaching our debt limit and Whitby wants us to borrow 100 million and we already need 100 million and there's only 100 million room left, then there's potential for the debt policies at the region to have to override things, and we'd have to get, legal opinions at the time. There are municipalities that struggle with that. Hopefully that will never be our issue because we plan long-term for all of these things, but that's what a debt management policy helps with. But I can't definitively say that I'm taking your Whitby's ARL, for example, plus the regions. It comes down to debates over joint and several for the debt itself. So because the region issues, in theory, the region's responsible, but the ministry issues ARLs for each of us.
yeah, so there's just, okay, so it's still not fully clear. There is some risk as we do, as all municipalities take on more debt, that we could hit our limit and have this problem in the future.
Yes, or through the chair, if a local defaults, for example, that is a regional problem. So that's why this committee, in theory, has some oversight there to make sure that the regional financial position is not adversely affected by a local municipal decision. So it will get complex if we get to those layers of concern with respect to debt load.
Yeah, no, that was my only concern when I, reading through that, there's that risk because everybody needs it. I know all the lower tiers are we need options, and everything, the costs are going up so much, so debt is becoming more prominent. Now on the interest costs, like is that if interest costs escalate, does that impact our repayment limit because we're actually paying more, or is it because it's only measured at the capital side, there's no real impact?
So it does affect us. The annual repayment limit is based on a cash flow calculation the ministry does on how much we can afford to pay back. So our debt limit isn't actually a number that you borrow, it's a number that you can afford to pay back. And then they calculate backwards and say, well, at these different variations of interest rates, this is what your theoretical debt maximum is. But they actually calculate based on how much they think you can afford to pay annually.
And that brings me, and that's what I was worried about again, that brings me to the next question. So in a rising interest rate environment, we have less and less ability to borrow. And then so you have the combined squeeze of rates rising, our ability decreasing, locals needing more. Like, where are we not coming to a point of potential risk where we might not be able to fill out our debt plans in the future? But the only benefit being as the region grows, we also get more capacity as we bring in more taxpayers.
We do, and this region has been very responsible and proactive with respect to how it's utilized debt historically and how we're planning to use it going forward. So that will help us manage the debt levels as we're projecting them through. So that's an important factor to keep in mind. That the other thing that has a bearing here is this whole notion of sinking fund will help us get better deals when we go to the market. So our AAA credit rating will have a greater importance, so that may help on that interest rate side.
Yeah.
The other piece that we've worked with, and I made the allusion to this in the report, that we're trying to, even though we've approved in budgets that we need to borrow, we're trying to put it off as long as possible so that we can start to see that downward slide in the rates. So a particular local may have asked for money in 2023. We've said to them, can you float and let us issue it later into 2024 when the market starts to at least somewhat correct itself. So we're trying to all use our internal cash flow to buy some time with respect to that.
Yeah, and then my last question was around, again, which you just alluded to, was borrowing internally. Since we have so much in reserves, are we not able to leverage that for maybe longer before we have to borrow? Or is it just, there's just too many demands on cash where we're just,
So-
it's more helpful for us to issue the debt?
So through the chair, I'll suggest to you a couple of things. It is, all the locals as well as the region have reserve funds. Our challenge is that we're also utilizing those at a greater rate. So if we have a very large project that's using both sources of funding, it limits our opportunity to piggyback a second time on the reserve funds. That's not to say that we won't do that. The other thing that's critical to note is that if you have internal borrowing that exceeds the term of council, you still have to do what we call paper it up. So the lawyers, the debt lawyers still say that we have to get it all ready and get certificates issued, pay all of those costs as if it's an external debt, because it becomes a long-term. In theory, the reserve funds you created are for a committed purpose already. So if you're going to use them for something else, then you have to actually paper
Show how it's
that
gonna
up
be
as
replaced.
official debt, that internal borrowing. So again, when we come to the end of a term of council, that becomes even more critical to make sure that we're very clear on how that's been structured.
Sounds simple all the time.
Yes.
I do
Exactly.
appreciate all your work, and it answers my question, so fully supportive of what we're doing here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor Schumer?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And through you, with respect to some of Councillor Leahy's comments or questions regarding internal borrowing and debentures, I think it's, it's in section 4, I think it's 4.6 or 4.5. It states that interest should be paid. I was under the impression that interest must be paid. Is that correct?
So through the chair, for any non-discretionary reserve funds, so development charge reserve funds, for example, if you borrow from those, you must repay. So any reserve funds that are statutorily protected, I'll call it that way, you have to pay interest between them. For reserve funds that council has opted to set aside through budget, in theory, council has the ability to decide if they want to use them for a different purpose. And so in theory, that would also mean that council, in my view, this is my opinion, could choose not to pay interest, but you have to on those non-discretionary, because there's commitments, for example, on the development charge side, there's legal commitments through all of the capital projects and the background study that commits to the development community on what those funds have to be used for. There are other examples of non-discretionary reserve funds. Those you must pay interest. I think it's a very good strategic financial policy that you always pay interest on your reserve funds that you're borrowing from. That because you've created those for a particular purpose and you're going to need them for that purpose at some point, and if you've degraded them, that causes you different issues.
Exactly. I fully agree with that. And as far as the prescribed rate, where does that prescribed rate come from? Is that dictated by the province or?
So through the chair, typically what we advise to the locals who call and ask, we can get estimates at any given time over what a debenture rate is. If we were good to go to the market tomorrow, we can get a projection. So often we'll say, well, if you're doing it over a number of years, here's the rates we would recommend you use. Some municipalities have in their policy that they pay, prime plus 1 or some kind of arrangement like that. So it's really a council policy that for the discretionary. For the non-discretionary, it's embedded in the DC legislation. I'd have to pull it out to tell you what it is, but in those ones that are legislated, it actually embeds in it, most of them, what the rate of interest has to be.
Okay, thank you very much.
Councillor Grant?
Thank you, Chair. When I read through the report, I was actually pleasantly surprised at the level of the current debt, both with the region as well as the municipal debt that is higher than that at 265 total. I get concerned when I start to see going to the necessary investment to go to 1.2 billion over the next 10 years to support the growth that's being pushed toward us and happening organically. My question would be, and it's perhaps towards the CAO, that we've got aggressive development put in front of us with very significant charges that many of the lower tier levels have committed to or pledged to meet. What actions are we taking with the feds and with the province to continue to push? The reason I ask is it's a Globe and Mail article. I was just trying to find it here now. I think it was in this morning's article that this is a nationwide situation of phenomenal growth. They're talking about what's happening in Calgary and so on. I'm just trying to understand better what is happening from our counterparts at the feds and the province to support us.
So perhaps if I may start on a bit more of a granular level, if that's okay. So from the perspective of the region itself, we have always, for a number of years, we've known that we are going to get into greater amounts of debt because we've been doing long-term planning for quite some time. And so the water sewer side, for example, we knew that at some point we would hit the target of needing to have water and sewer plant expansions. So our 10-year forecast and the one that's been evolved each year reflects that greater level of debt, and that's why this committee would have seen that, particularly in the 2023 budget, that you start to see that really taking hold now. What Bill 23 is doing to us is two things. It's advancing the timing of that because the growth is being advanced as opposed to where we had originally, projected, and it's eliminating a huge chunk of what development charges would pay for, so that means it has to be paid for somehow. So the Bill 23 issue is making that situation worse. I will tell you that there are some entities out there who believe that regions and local municipalities as a whole have not been borrowing the way they feel they should, that for everything that we do, we should borrow and have future taxpayers pay for that. Our perspective is that we're responsible now to who we're dealing with, and we need to be fiscally reasonable over what we're incurring debt for. So there's that philosophical difference occurs in the, that's why we get low rankings, for example, from CD Howe, because we philosophically disagree with their position. So I have no interest in trying to make them happy and give us a greater grade. That being said, with respect to how the province and feds, how they're going to help us, I think if Elaine doesn't mind, I'll turn that sort of bigger picture over.
There is a growing issue across municipalities across the country, but we're focusing on Ontario right now with respect to long-term fiscal sustainability. So we're working together through the regional and single-tier CAOs, mayors and chairs, big city mayors groups, with AMO to look at long-term sustainability requirements for the municipal sector. We are looking at strategies for addressing this with the provincial and federal governments. I can tell you that within the region, the chair and I have met with provincial officials, including the Minister of Finance, to raise some of the fiscal sustainability issues, and I will be off to Ottawa on the 20th, where that will also be an issue with the federal government. We are encouraging all to provide additional resources to fund affordable housing, as well as the infrastructure required to support the growth, which is the key fiscal pressure for the region. And we're not unique in that. Where we are unique is we probably have a greater room to borrow than other municipalities whose debt levels are already in the billions of dollars. So we are a little bit more flexibility there than others. But it is top of mind for most of the mayors, chairs, and CAOs across the province. We'll probably be able to report back on it early in the new year.
Fair enough. Okay. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor McDougall, question?
Yes, thank you. Just a question in terms of our levels of reserves, and my understanding is to date, we have basically provided costing to fully fund our project. So we're projecting out that we need to build a reserve this big for, say, a sewers plant expansion, or 50% of the sewer plant expansion at this point in time, and we'll commit the rest at other points in time. We talked about erosion of capabilities, and my question is what is happening right now with interest rates and inflation, and where we've costed and projected those costs to be in the future? We've created these reserves to build projects, but now what we're seeing is when we budgeted them that $500 a square foot 5 years ago, it's now $1,000 a square foot.
So through the chair, there's I'll say two main things that we're doing. Number one, this committee approved us to go down the road of prudent investor. So that will help prop up our interest earnings in those reserve funds because our investments cover all kinds of different things, one of which is the reserve funds. So if we can maximize our earnings there, that helps to offset that time value of money that we're struggling with. But the other piece, and Ramesh, our Commissioner of Works, and I were chatting about this the other day, and Elaine has long mentioned this, what it means is we have now this challenge in our capital program where we can do less with the money we have, but the earlier discussion we just had is that external factors like the housing targets are forcing our capital projects forward. So we are struggling in that position where in the normal course of things, as treasurer, I would say to the Commissioner of Works, well, this is how much you've got. So if you can only do one project instead of 4, then that's all that goes in the budget. However, he's faced with that opposite side where we need to get infrastructure in the ground to meet the targets. So it is a very challenging time, and part of the reason why the guideline issue is really challenging because we're trying to figure out things we can do that are real as opposed to that aren't feasible. That's our real struggle because we're caught between that a rock and a hard place, I suppose.
Follow-up question?
No, that's all. Just the cost of delay gets highlighted every single year as we move down the road here.
We're really seeing it in all of our projects. Okay, the motion's been duly moved and seconded. If there's no further debate, I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? That item is carried. The next item is authorization to undertake a review and update of the Seton water supply. It's a fairly lengthy recommendation with 6 parts. Moved by Councillor Leahy, second by Councillor Lee. Commissioner, do you want to speak to this?
Through the chair, the only thing I would point out here, this is, we have to do this every 5 years for their bylaw. It's the bylaw that funds the work that happens in the Seton subdivision. The only two things different this year. In the past, we have had the developer pay for the cost because it's truly this is a development charge study that supports that area-specific DC that they recover funds from. This year, we can't, under Bill 23, we can't build them for it. But background studies are no longer eligible, so that means we have to fund it. So we're funding it from a capital reserve fund that we had set aside for our share of Seton work. So unfortunately, that's the one side effect. The other part, though, is that they're now at the mercy of the phase-in. So it'll be interesting to see how that evolves from that developer group's perspective.
Councillor Leahy.
Thank you, Mayor Ash. So on that, you were talking about, I wanted to ask about the Bill 23 with area-specific charges. So as those costs escalate, they should take on a bigger portion of those costs. But if I'm understanding correctly, under Bill 23, we're taking on a bigger portion of those costs as well. So are our costs escalating through this agreement, just through the impact of Bill 23 and the escalating infrastructure costs?
So we're still trying to work this one out, but in this case, right now, the upfront effect is we have to pay for the cost of the study. Mm-hmm. I think in the long run, the regional position is that the developer will be short because these charges primarily pay the developer for the works that they have to put in the ground on the region's behalf to service that area.
Got it.
So my view is if the collections are now going to be short because of the 20%, then they will just get reimbursed less and they will be out of pocket. That's my position.
Do you think that one's going to fly?
Well, I will be giving it my best shot. The legislation doesn't exempt this is what we collect, that's not as much as what you paid.
And the
that's
largest
not my problem.
landowners, this province.
Yeah.
And we bill the province for their share of works there. So it will be interesting is the best I can say there. But certainly our position is that we give you the DCs we've collected for the projects that are listed, and if that's short, that's your problem. Again,
And that leads to my next piece there, just understanding with that gap in the legislation, aren't we at risk of someone saying, well, no, I've done this work for you, even though if you don't give me all the costs, you owe me the balance. Could they not take us to court? Are there not risks around that?
So I think in this case, number one, we will speak to when we come back with a background study and a bylaw, we will make sure that we have the provincial direction, I guess, and as much guidance and legal opinion as we can put into it.
Right.
So we will certainly work that way. What's unique about this is that it was, the agreements were established back in 2015.
Yes.
So we do have those things to leverage that predate all of the changes that have happened since then. So that's where we would work that out, and certainly when we report back on, the conclusion of the background study and the bylaw, we would make sure that we've laid out any of those issues so that this committee would be very clear on what that means.
Yeah, oh, make no mistake, I'm supportive of your position. I'm just worried about it. And then and the corollary to this is that if we were to start this process, let's say an imaginary Seton was to start today under the new rules, like obviously we'd have a totally different agreement and we would have to owe more or less, because it would be hard to put it on, let's say, a landowner or a developer to do all those costs knowing that they're not going to get fully reimbursed. Like they might do it.
I would suggest to you that this is a unique situation of the time, and likely it would be rare for it to be repeated. I would suggest that you're correct in that the development community would take advantage of the prevailing legislation of the day, which is in their benefit.
Yeah, so and then that leads to the fact, so if we're just with less money, then we're just going to develop things slower, so which ultimately means there'll be less houses if we don't have enough DCs and resources to cover all the infrastructure requirements. Like that's just a natural consequence of those changes.
So through the chair, that's exactly my answer to Councillor McDougall. Costs are going up, there's less money, and we're being forced to advance projects. So something has to give at some point.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, thank you. Appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, the motion been duly moved and seconded. I don't see any further questions. I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? That item is carried. Next report is in regards to the Durham Region's response to the proposed Affordable Homes and Good Jobs Act. Commissioner, you want to speak to this?
So through the chair, we have a lot of attachments on this one to explain, but really we didn't have the time based on when we had to comment. So staff had to proceed with the submission, and now we're bringing it back to you for ratification, I suppose, and we can certainly make any further changes and send in, even though it's past the deadline, we can certainly attempt to send in any additional comments, but this is particular to the affordable housing piece.
Okay, do I have a mover and seconder? Moved by Councillor Leahy, second by Councillor Lee. Any debate? Any questions? Being none, I'm going to, Councillor Leahy.
Thank you. So I guess, again, trying to understand all the different, like it's walking through the report and all the calculations. So it's going to be the average income in the area, and then 30% of that income, and then how those are going to change, and then reimbursement of some DC charges. Like those numbers are constantly moving. So how do we realistically budget and understand, plan for that so that we can get as many units as possible? I guess that's the first question.
So from an internal perspective, I'll start with that. There is a huge challenge here with respect to administration of this, because you're quite right. From the time any subdivision submission comes in, when it shows in the report when we charge at certain points, we won't know till the end what's actually should have been charged. And then from the local perspective, there have to be agreements that ride for 25 years that have to be verified every year, so that somebody doesn't buy an affordable home in year one with no DC, and in year two sell it at full competitive market rates and essentially make a profit off that differential. So the administrative side is hugely concerning. But the other side that's concerning really is that this isn't tied to an affordable person. So we're providing affordable housing, but there's no requirement that it be sold to somebody who requires affordable housing. So those are really, I mean, there's lots of technical issues as well, but those are kind of our two big picture concerns that we've tried to express.
So is it that where, looking at what, some other areas have looked at doing, do you create an organization or a trust or something that manages all those. So the ones that go into that trust and their management, and then you know that it's always going to be 30, and any profitable is shared with that. Like there are other creative ideas we can look at to try and manage that, so we can maximize the number of units, but still make sure it's doing its intended purpose to helping those most in need of affordable housing.
So through the chair, that's what the recommendation A with 3 little I's is intended to do, is to say, can we try to figure out some creative way? If this is the only option of how we have to proceed, can you give us some creative ways of overseeing and administering it? And what does that look like? Because the way you read it now, it will be painful for many years to come.
And that's what I mean, like, is that, and through that creativity, do you create like some nonprofit entity that manages those properties and makes sure that it stays there, and that if any profit taking is taken, goes back to that entity, and we sign agreements so that nobody gets that, but we maximize the number of units, and then any profits and that go into future long-term house cares, like, is
So-
that something we can look at?
So through the chair, I'll flip to Elaine. One comment on that. Keep in mind, though, that this is not, the only part of this is affordable rental.
Yeah.
The affordable ownership means that, I mean, once the house is sold, there is no overseeing entity, and it's only the upper tier and the lower tier, local, that have the authority to collect DCs. A nonprofit doesn't. So the administration gets more complex. And Elaine, I'm not sure if I spoke on your behalf there, but if you had.
All I was going to say is, in terms of administration, I think all options are on the table, and once the legislation is finalized, we would look at what the best way is to manage that within Durham Region, whether it be through a not-for-profit, a partner of our social services department, or internally, but it's a very complex issue. And the other issue is that 25 years goes past much quicker than we think, and we don't want to find ourselves in the same position with a lack of affordable rental in 25 years. So we'll have to also plan for the long term, which again is why any revenues need to be considered for state of good repair.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate that, and I guess my line of thought and questioning was more around affordable ownership, because one of the creative thoughts was to just, so this is what you do, you agree, okay, you're going to stay in that house if it's affordable ownership, maybe you have no DCs, maybe you get some kick in from whoever's developing it to put it there, but you have to stay there for, let's say, 25 years. I think they're looking at something like that in York. And if you stay there 25 years, you get to keep the full profit. But if you sell anything earlier, the profit goes back into the organization that manages it. So that profit is shared to fund future homes into the future. So it's like almost like a private sector way to try, and we contribute as the government, the DC lost. The private sector will lower their profit in an effort to try and create more affordable housing units within like an ecosystem like that, that's managed like that way.
So if I may, through the chair, the challenge is that this is intended to ride across all development. So any given subdivision, if there's, say, 5% that turn out to be affordable, who is tracking? So the rental context is almost easier because you have somebody that owns the rental building and you have some ability to have partnerships. But if you're looking at an average subdivision where, 10 of the homes in the subdivision are affordable in year one, well, the builder is done and gone. So then how do you, for 25 years, track that it retains within this window? And when it doesn't, what's your legal leverage to make that person at that point pay a development charge? And how much do they pay? Do they pay, if they're 10 years into it, some proportionate share? It's incredibly complicated to try to figure out how we would handle the ownership side. The rental won't be easy, but at least there's structures
There is some
that we've
structure
seen historically in how we administer that could possibly, now remember, even on the rental side, there's no income test.
No.
So, that may not achieve the goal that we would want to see from that social perspective.
No, and recognizing that it's very complex, just trying to think if we want those affordable houses to be affordable in the future, if we
Yes.
don't register them or have some type of agreement on sale that's enforceable through us, through the courts, like there has to be a way. I'm not saying it's easy.
Yes, and through the chair, that's exactly what we're hoping to
Yeah.
have some dialogue on through this discussions with the province and figure out how do we administer this thing.
Yeah, to try and make it affordable now and 5 and 10 years from now for the next person.
And don't forget, our estimate is that for every 5% that fits in this definition, that's 200 million over the 10 years that we're short again, on top of our Bill 23 numbers.
You're just full of good news.
I am full of good news. I am full of good news. Sorry, Elaine?
There are organizations that we can work with to work through some of these complexities. Black North comes to mind, and Habitat for Humanity, who are well into building affordable housing and have processes to ensure that it remains affordable for the 25-year period. So we would certainly look to working with them to look at what the best business model will be after we see what the legislation and regulations look like.
Yeah, no, and appreciate that, fully supportive. I'm just thinking of all the complexities, challenges, and how do we assure that affordability stays there? So we give up the government funding and the DC supports now. I want it to work for years, not just once. But that's just me. Thank you.
Councilor McDougall? I do another request, please. There you go.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. Question is we're talking about affordability and an area. Is the area the region of Durham in this report?
Through the chair, yes. So this is intended to be, the affordability hopefully targets are broad sweeping across. So Township of Scugog, a developer could hopefully come forward and say, out of the 100 units I'm planning to build, I'm prepared to attempt to have 20 of them affordable. They won't know till they get, to give them their due, they won't know till they get through certain processes in their subdivision planning whether it's ultimately going to qualify, because they're going to do the math and say, gee, can I afford to sell this house as an affordable one, or am I going to not keep it in that bucket? So the development community on the ownership side will have struggles determining what they're going to commit to and what they can deliver on by the time they work through this formula that they give. How does that compare to the ultimate cost and financing and profit margin that a developer requires? So they'll have to do that analysis on the ownership side to determine how many they're prepared to include in any given subdivision or development. So it's quite a complex thing between the rental side versus the ownership side. There's different challenges that are presented by each of those.
So I'm thinking in terms of North Durham. So is there a possibility that, I'm looking at Mayor Schumer, is there a possibility in Beaverton that an entire whole subdivision might be considered affordable as compared to South Durham?
It all will depend on applying these formulas. So when we get the bulletins that will be posted, presumably annually by the minister, it will lay out by zone or geographic area what the numbers are. And they'll have to do that very regularly because all of the income factors change every year, right? So they will be issuing essentially a bulletin across the province based on various zones and areas of what the numbers are for the 60% and the 30% over what qualifies. So a developer, for example, will have to keep paying attention to that to determine whether they can meet that and still make a profit that they'd need to make in Beaverton, for example.
So the area, though, geographically speaking, is the region of Durham, not the area municipalities.
Through the chair, the area is the entire province, and they're going to break it down. It's not going to be one number for the region of Durham. Okay. I think, sorry, I'm now getting to what you're actually asking me. My apologies. We had said in the beginning that you can't set a rate based on an average in Lakeshore municipalities, for example, or everything that happens in Scugog or Brock could qualify here, which means there could be challenges getting growth to occur, because it limits profit margin, right? So yes, the province is setting it up, as I understand it, to be geographic zones that don't necessarily have anything to do with upper and lower.
Okay.
Right? They need to cover the whole province to encourage things across the province. So it won't be a region of Durham number. It'll be Perhaps it'll be a lakeshore, perhaps it'll be by local municipality. I haven't seen anything that has a bulletin yet that tells me how far down they're going to drill, but my understanding is that it is going to be drilled down. It's not going to be a number that distorts a municipality such as Durham that has such a broad range.
Okay, very good. That's
So
all, thank you.
hopefully that's what we'll see. That's what my understanding is, that they actually recognize that, so.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. If there's no further questions, I'm going to, the motion's been duly moved in second. I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? That item is carried. There's no advisory committee resolutions. We do have confidential matters. Please be advised the committee will now meet in closed session in accordance with subsection 239(2) of the Municipal Act to consider proposed or pending acquisition or disposition of land with respect to a confidential report and presentation regarding a proposed pending acquisition or disposition of land for Durham Regional Police Services as it relates to a property in the town of Ajax. I will be verbally reporting in a general sense of all items considered in the closed sessions once we rise from closed session and move back to open session. Motion moved in closed session. Moved by Councillor Lee, second by Councillor Leahy. All those in favor? That item's carried. We need about 5 minutes to set up. So recharge your coffee.
You want me to switch back on?
TMI. TMI. I'm going to call the meeting back to order. In the continued interest of transparency and open government, I'm reporting in public session any outcome from today's closed session meeting. As a result of our closed session session today, I wish to report there was discussion in regards to a police services board report and a report from our Commissioner of Finance in regards to the discussions in regards to obtaining land. No decisions were made in camera. So it would be appropriate now to have a motion. It's moved by Councillor Wu and seconded by Councillor Lee that option B as outlined in the confidential report from the Commissioner be approved. Debate. Mayor Schumer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, I wish I could support it, but I can't. I know that the police require some serious investments and changes. I've had discussions with the chief about some of that, but I think given the sheer length of the conversation we had, the number of questions, and the chief's own comments about the state of various infrastructure dictates the need for the study, which will happen. But I think moving ahead with a capital program that we have discussed ahead of a report to deal with serious capital infrastructure is putting the cart before the horse. I want to assist the police. I think they do need it, but I think we're moving ahead of ourselves here. Not to mention other concerns rightfully brought up by members of committee. So I cannot support this. I don't think waiting for a fulsome report on the infrastructure would cause undue hardship with the police service. But I do believe there could be undue hardship to the region as a whole. And just as a note, you know, we in Brock went through kind of a similar problem in the last few years or the last decade, where an infrastructure program or an infrastructure action was taken which is going to cost us upwards of over $10 million. When really, if we press the pause button and taken a look at the entire municipality and the entire infrastructure needs with respect to that department, we would have come out ahead. We would have gotten more for our dollar. So there's no way I can support this as much as I wish to support the Durham Police operations and their capital. I think there's a way to do it, and this is not it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor, is there no members of the committee want to debate? Then I'll go to Councillor Marin Pavetri. Tito, over to you.
Mr. Chair, very productive meeting. And I just want to say that the option that's being provided also comes with assurances from my understanding that this direction, the one that the DRPS is moving in, will facilitate a police station for North Oshawa. That's not just lip service, and I don't expect the smiles on the faces of...
I don't think the report says that.
No, but it better, and it better in future, because this is the beginning of the steps that we need to take in order to modernize police services. And I'll just have to say that the option speaks to the fact that we're increasing and incurring density and issues as a result of densities that are being forced upon us by provincial governments, and also housing needs. But the reality is that the investment that needs to happen, whether it's in frontline policing or the bricks and mortar to deploy frontline policing, needs to be embraced. And I think that this is the first step in doing so. And as a second step, one equally important, I expect to hear through you, Mr. Chair, through DRPS Board and Finance, because I know we have two mayors that are sitting here in the meeting that are in carriage of the file, as well as a Police Services Board representative, being Councillor Wu, that the second step happen very soon, in that we at Council consider lands and the appropriate project for North Oshawa. And that's where I stand, because I think it's important that it's recognized. I'm not going to get into what the presentation from the chief or what the report says, because it's in a confidential format. But I do have reservations with moving forward with option B, unless the assurances for option B in second step for the North Oshawa Police Station is executed on in a way that is tangible, not just in the form of a report or a verbal sort of consideration. The need is now.
I hope you haven't started something. Councillor Neal. John, you're on.
Yeah, thanks very much, Mr. Chair. And I agree wholeheartedly with Councillor Marin Pietri has just stated, as we've stated it many times, and I'm glad the chief is on board with the North Oshawa Station as well. But having said that, Councillor Wu, I think, mentioned the Maple Grove Station. It's on a 27-acre parcel. Now, I understand that for 2023, when this was completed and opened, that in 2023, there was going to be more phases done, and 2023 was the trigger year. Am I correct in stating that? And it's on 27 acres as well?
Commissioner?
Through the chair, off the top of my head, I cannot tell you what the full build-out of that facility or site was expected to be. I don't think anybody in the room can. Many of us are newer than when that campus was triggered. So certainly from a staff perspective, my apologies, we can't answer that question. We can certainly send you a memo or an email that explains our knowledge at the time. We have our CAO of DRPS may be able to assist us.
So yeah, the campus in Clarion will be completed substantially in 2025, and that's 4 buildings erected on that property.
Well, this is it 27 acres?
I'll come back to you. I can send that back today. I'll get the exact number of acres. I'm not sure off the top of my head.
Yeah, perhaps you can send it to the clerk, and we can send it to all members. Thank you. John?
Well, I mean, we're talking about like there was a major police station, and I remember that specifically because I've been around even for that North Durham police station, the grand opening for that. So I've been around for a few police stations, but I remember that one took a while because everything had to be specifically designed. We had to build brand new. We had to get that piece of property because everything was specifically designed to police specifications. So how can you now say we're going to take on an older building and retrofit it? So that's what my question is.
I don't think we want to get into the description of the building, but your comments are noted, Councillor.
Yeah, okay. Well,
Thank you. I'm going to ask for a recorded vote. There's 6 members present and 2 external. So I'm going to call, there's a motion duly moved and seconded. Option B is outlined in the staff report. It's moved by Councillor Wu, second by Councillor Lee. And recorded vote is open. Councillor Lee? Leahy, you didn't vote? Oh, you haven't voted because you haven't made up your mind, I see. Yep. Tie vote. The vote is 4-4, so it's deemed defeated. That could work. This won't come as a recommendation, but we can refer the item to council. Motion by Councillor Lee, second by Councillor McDougall, that the report be referred to council for decision without a recommendation. All those in favor? Opposed? That item is carried. Am I doing that correctly? Am I all right with that? Okay. Other business, folks? No other business. Our next meeting is December the 12th. Motion to adjourn would be in order. Okay. Marion Petrie, you always move adjournment. Moved by Councillor Leahy, second by Councillor Lee. All those in favor, opposed, that item's carried. Thank you, folks.